you think of when you hear the words Time magazine? Person of the year? An old magazine? Many historical pictures? Or maybe the thin red letters spaced out that spell out time with the red border. Throughout history, Time has evolved, and we don't mean that sarcastically. The magazine has gone through some major changes throughout history, while still printing out life-changing stories. From important political news to the coming out of a celebrity, Time has covered it all. Throughout this presentation, you will learn about the creators of Time, many notable stories, many notable covers, and how the magazine has evolved over the years. Time creator Brenton Haddon got his start in publication at a newspaper writing for Brooklyn's Poly Prep Country Day School. He then continued to write for a weekly paper, the Hotchkiss Record, where he met his rival Henry Luce. At Hotchkiss, Luce was elected assistant managing editor. At Yale, Haddon was elected to the staff at the Yale Daily News and served as the paper's chairman. Luce was the news managing editor the second time around. After leaving Yale in 1920, Haddon wrote for the New York World. He was mentored by one of New York's most famous and accomplished newspaper editors, Herbert Bayard Swope. In 1921, Haddon wrote to Luce, who had been let go by the Chicago Daily News, and suggested they both work elsewhere in Baltimore. While in Baltimore, the two spent late nights working on the idea of a news magazine to get current events out in a small and timely manner. 3 months later, both Luce and Haddon would leave for New York City to begin publishing the magazine, Facts. However, both men became disenchanted with the title of Facts. John Tubble was quoted saying, "The Digest selected its subjects arbitrarily and treated them at length, quoting liberally from newspapers and other sources. Time, by contrast, would cover all the news briefly and in its own organized way." Both Luce and Haddon wanted to break down the news into categories, with each category delivering short news stories that readers could understand and remember. And thus, Time magazine was formed. On March 3, 1923, the first issue of Time was published, with Joseph G. Uncle Joe Cannon, former House Speaker, gracing the cover. Throughout its beginning years, Time had many notable covers. In 1927, Charles Lindbergh was named Time's first Man of the Year, after his historic flight across the Atlantic Ocean. In 1938, Hitler appeared on the cover as the Man of the Year due to all the achievements he had over the year of 37 and 38. In 1953, Queen Elizabeth II had been chosen for Time's Man of the Year after her father had died and she became queen. She had previously graced Time's cover in 1929 as a baby titled Elizabeth of York, the future Queen Elizabeth II. On February 27, 1929, Brenton Haddon, who had become severely ill, died. Before he passed away, he wrote in his will that his family could not sell his stock in Time magazine for 49 years, thus preventing Luce from having immediate control of the magazine they started together. Luce, however, bargained with Haddon's family to buy most of his stock in Time magazine at a bargain price. Haddon's name was removed from the masthead of the magazine. His biography, nor a eulogy of his life, was published in the magazine. Luce traveled the world taking credit for many of Haddon's ideas and only mentioning his name a handful of times throughout the rest of his life.
Time magazine is known for reporting on events found throughout a variety of subjects, from political issues to sports teams and everything in between. Some of their most memorable pieces are written about events that shaped the America we know today. One of the things that makes Time magazine so memorable and recognizable is their use of well-known or important figures on the cover of their publications. From 1955 to 1967, Time published a variety of articles about the Civil Rights Movement, dedicating at least 11 of the magazine's covers to the faces of big influences in the fight for equal rights. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. graces 3 of these 11 covers, and one of those 3 even declare him as the Man of the Year. Also in the 1950s, Time published their first real-time articles about the Vietnam War, which started in 1955 and lasted until 1975, the last of which is titled The Last Exit from Vietnam. These articles also showcase notable faces from the time period, such as American soldiers, military leaders, and the leaders of the enemy side. These articles describe the events of the war and the protests seen throughout the country against the war effort. Many of the same things happened with the Cold War, which is no surprise. The magazine also focuses on important social events such as Elizabeth II's story and inauguration, Richard Nixon and his Watergate scandal, and the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Political statements are not the entire focus of this magazine, though. The publication made sure to include information about everyday details of life, such as information about sports, music, entertainment, and finances. The way that Time examined all of these topics sets the magazine apart from the rest of the news publications because the articles not only gave facts, they also included educated insights by the authors, how these things would be expected to affect society and the political climate, and made reading about these events somewhat enjoyable because of the amount of pictures included with the publication. The iconic front covers of the magazine also set it apart from other print publications because these covers display what Time believed the public needed to know about most, and readers can readily assume what each week's edition will be about. Obviously, all of these consistencies within the magazine have kept readers interested and wanting more, as we are beginning to approach the 100th anniversary of the magazine. Time's popularity is well-deserved and has brought many topics to the surface over its many years of publication.
We by now obviously know how and when Time magazine was created and how it was evolved over the years. However, now let's get into current day and discuss how Time magazine has formed into what is known as today. Time magazine loves to feature important faces on the front cover. For example, Ronald Reagan got elected president in 1981 and had served his term until 1989. Time had done a whole magazine coverage about him, along with some of the copious amount of things that he had done for our nation at the time being. Another monumental moment in time that Time magazine features is the Americans with Disabilities Act, being signed in 1990. This was an evolving time in history because it is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, and all the public and private places that are open to the general public. I think it's amazing how Time had documented this turning point in society because they show how supporting they are about the ADA. Now, let's get forward to a couple years to 2001, a year that will always be remembered as well as brought up in history. On Tuesday, September 11th, 2 planes were hijacked by terrorists and flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. A catastrophic amount of 2,996 people were killed on that very day. Even if you weren't born during this time period, schools will forever talk about 9/11 and address this vital topic to all the generations that will come after us. Time magazine had incorporated numerous traumatizing pictures of the buildings crumbling down as well as human lives jumping out of the burning buildings. These photos were taken by Lyle Owerko, a photographer who was in the area when the attack had taken place. Time magazine had done a great job addressing this mortifying time in history as well as documenting real pictures. I can't imagine how hard it must have been on them to write this article in detail. Speaking of tragedies, a couple years had gone by, and then Time talks about the unfortunate Hurricane Katrina that took place in 2005, striking the Gulf Coast. It had a Category 3 rating, along with the sustained winds of 100 to 140 miles per hour, and stretched 400 miles across. A heartbreaking total of 1,833 lives were taken from Hurricane Katrina, a tragic event that will again never be forgotten. Let's now talk about something a little more uplifting and positive, like Barack Obama being the first African American to be elected president in 2008. This was an immense defining moment in society, especially for the African American community. Obama had done more than a handful of things for our nation, like creating Obamacare, an Affordable Care Act for health insurance. Following that, he had ordered for the capture and the killing of Osama bin Laden, which had took place in 2011. Osama was a leader who had organized as well as responsible for the terrorist attacks that took place on 9/11. I can go on and on about Barack Obama, but now let's talk about current day and how Time magazine had evolved over the years. Donald Trump, who is known as a successful businessman, had been elected president in 2016 and is now obviously our nation's current president. Time magazine had captured important figures in history along with horrific events that had taken place over the years. But overall, I believe that these events have made our country stronger than ever and brought us together as one.
As you have seen, Time magazine has achieved a lot in its many years of being published. Its first edition came out on March 3, 1923, and has since been a household name and a large resource of information for happenings both within the country and abroad. From Hitler being named Man of the Year to the legalization of gay marriage, the news magazine has covered a variety of hard, important topics and has educated its audience in many areas with its facts, its scholarly merit, and its humor. Though the publication is complex and varied, it is reassuring to be able to access these articles written in real time about important events in our society, allowing the audience a, brief look at time.